is me, as the one and only Paul Friends, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe On Call. And tonight, it's just me and Dave. At the moment, Russ might show up. Barry looks like he's not going to be here this evening, which is fine. He said he might not be able to make it, then that's fine too. So this evening, what I figured I'd have a topic on is something that I know I've discussed before, but it's always a good, I think, one to bring around again, just because of the biggest thing with this topic is that, it's maybe I can call it just an oldie but a goodie, just because of the big issue with it. And the topic for this evening is going to be play by email. Just for those who aren't as familiar with that, play by email is the way we used to play when the internet was still young. Yes, there was a point where there was no such thing as like SFU online. There was no such thing as like BattleNet. Those all did not exist. That one of the main ways of playing a SFB game was using your email client, or or browse. Even the browser. Even back then, you could use a browser, but whatever. The key is that it was an email. Now, what's the there's some wonderful parts about play by email. There's some awful parts about email. Well, bad parts. I'm like, I wouldn't call them awful, but if you want live, across the table or even across the screen, action. Play by email is not that's not what you want. Big surprise. But here's the wonderful thing. If you're one of those people that doesn't have a lot of time in your day, I mean, when it comes to, you can block off 3-4 hours to play an online game, or even play an in real life game, what's called IRL, then play by email would be definitely something for you. Obviously, these days it's hard to find a play by email game. At least people that want to play. I understand that is a difficulty at the moment. Actually, one of the reasons why I brought up the topic was that I actually, on my Discord server for SFB Online, next for Fran's Games, had a person who hadn't played for a while and wanted to get back into it, and so we discussed it. And one thing that came up was playing by email. Now, the wonderful part about playing by email is that you can take your time. You can take your time to think about it. It's one of those great things where, while you're away from your computer, when you don't have any, in theory, you could work on it on your phone. Prepare notes, or even prepare your what's called a SOP, which basically tells the orders that you want, where you want to move your ships, and how you want to move your drones. When it comes to seeking weapons, the one thing about play by email is that most of the time you give up that control. That's one of those things that for some people they have a hard time with when it comes to play by email. And that is the whole idea of actually giving up that level of control that they're used with free movement. Now, here's the thing. With free movement, that's not when the SFB was first created. I know you're going to tell me, I've talked about this before, which is it was actually plotted. You had plotted movement. Not plotted action, but plotted movement. Which to me is a godsend. Because I've always believed in by plotted movement. And this is the reason why. And that is because it allows you to, both players to work at the same time. You're not waiting for your person to move their ships because it's already been plotted. And even, because it's already, you don't have to do anything because it's already plotted, and therefore it actually speeds up the game. Now, it obviously requires quite a bit of thinking to do, but that means you have to outthink your opponent. Now, one thing that if you ever play by email, when it comes to, and most of the play by email games I've experienced are tournament games, because when we played tournaments, that's how we played. We played online. We played by email. Now, obviously, the difficult part about playing by email is that it requires 2 players. Big surprise. Actually, it requires 3 people. You have 1 opponent and then 2 opponents. You can actually have more, but most of the time it's been tournament. A dual situation, and you have a moderator. Now, the moderator is the one who actually runs the orders. Now, in theory, and I thought about this. I worked on this. Many, many, many years ago, and that is the whole idea of a play-by-email server. That what it would do is actually it would accept the orders from the players. The players would basically kind of program, the orders in, for the conditionals and things like that. And then it would execute the orders for you. So then instead of requiring that moderator, you can automate the whole process and it would run the orders for you. Now, I might do something like that again, but I might go back to work on that a little bit. I'd have to actually dig up all the stuff. But at the moment, I have no real desire to get back into doing that because, to be honest, I don't see a big, financial benefit to doing something like that at the moment. The only thing that I would might, if I would ever work on that again, it probably would be an open source project. Now, meaning open source, that means it has to be generic in basis, i.e., you'd have to be able to set up certain things. Certain things could not be programmed into the server, like impulse movement. You could not do impulse movement by default in such like an open source project because that is actual IP owned by Amarillo Design Bureau, ADB. So you could actually do it in generic fashion, where, currently the thing is what you can do at the moment is you can do a vassal, where you can do movements. But here's the one thing that vassal cannot do, that if and this is a big if, that we were to develop a play by email server, and that is that you'd actually be able to write conditionals. Therefore, it would be moved in an automated fashion. You could actually have secret orders and, secret orders. That'd be a great benefit. Now, that'd be kind of a cool idea, but I said, if it was to be something to work on, it had to be like an open source project to do something like that. I'd have to look to see if there's any open source project that already does that. For all I know, it might already do that. The closest one at the moment, as I said, is Vassal, and I haven't even looked at where they keep the source code for Vassal. But anyway, but the thing with play by email is, as I pointed out before I got sidetracked talking about the play by email server, that the benefit, one of those benefits for play by email is it's asynchronous. That means it doesn't require you to spend 3 to 4 hours straight, or possibly even longer, sitting down at a computer and playing online against somebody. You can do this in your spare time. You can think about it, without the requirement of a computer, and then write it down later when you actually want to formulate. After you formulate your thoughts, maybe even have a little notebook and you write down your thoughts and do it that way. Obviously you can write notes in your phone if you want to do it there. Obviously, not everyone has access to smartphones, either because they're too expensive for them, or in some cases because your work doesn't allow it. I know that's a rare thing that people are not allowed to have their cell phones with them while they're at work. But there are certain cases, including military and things such like that, and possibly even for some places when you have retail, you're not allowed to have your cell phone with you and so forth. And I know my daughter wasn't supposed to; she did anyway, but she tried not to answer it, at every little blip and bleep while she was at work. But she left it on just in case she needed to have, in case of emergencies and things like that. But anyhow, that's the wonderful part about play by email, because you don't have to allocate that much time for it, and therefore, it can. Yes, it will. When it comes to overall time, when it comes to getting how long it's going to take you to play a game, yes, it's going to take you. When it comes to number of days, it could take you a month, could take you 6 months. Heck, depending upon the game, it might take you over a year. Depends upon multiple things. Depends upon 1, the responsiveness of your moderator, 2, the responsiveness of your opponent, 3, the responsiveness of you. Because if you're playing and you don't respond to the sit rep in a timely fashion, it takes longer. Now, the one thing about play-by-email games, definitely in tournament play, there would be a requirement that you have to respond within like a week. And if after a certain point, what happened is after you get a warning, okay, you're over it, then you get hull damage. You get penalized for not responding. And obviously, if you're on vacation, that you can't respond. But the idea of it is that if you were to go on vacation, you just send a quick little email. Well, it'd take you 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds to formulate email saying, I'm going to be on vacation from ba-bum, so I won't be able to respond to email. I won't be able to, we'll have to pause the game until I get back from vacation. How hard is that to write up? So overall, that's the thing. Now, I got the one game that I just started. Actually, we started it a few weeks ago. It's been taking us a while to get started because of various issues, including one of the players. One of the players basically had an issue with their EA, and it took them a couple times to get the EA properly. So let me just go through the way play by email works. How it's run. What happens is, first that at the beginning of the game, you figure out what the scenario is, board size, floating map, fixed map, what do you have for each ship and positions. Now, obviously, if it's one of those scenarios from the Starfleet battles from the rule book, there are some scenarios where you're given an option. You have to be like within 5 hexes of whatever, like 4203 or some other hex location. So at that point, you have to, you set up the actual initial positions of all the ships or whatever else it might be on the board. Then you have both players, or how many players there are. We're going to go with like a duel situation, just because it's simpler to describe than saying, okay, all opponents. But you send out, say everyone sends in their EAs. The two players will send in their EAs. The moderator will then go verify that the EAs are good. And see, there's one thing with SFU Online is that it can verify the numbers. It can't verify that, oh, you just allocated 5 points of power to your disruptor, which is illegal. It doesn't work. Actually, you're wasting energy at that point, really, if you think about it. But anyway, at that point, if there's an issue with the EA, then the moderator will then send it back to the individual players who have issues with their EAs. And after that's all resolved, then the moderator will then send out a SITREP, a situation report. And that will will show people, initial locations, speed, for the beginning of turn 1. Now, after that, then the players would then send in their SOPs, standing order of procedures. What that means is you will plot you might do a movement plot or might not do a movement plot. I'll get to that in a moment. But you might do a movement plot for those 16 impulses, like the first 16 impulses. To be honest, when it comes to duels, the first 16 impulses are blazingly fast. Why? Because invariably, people don't have any breaks. And the reason why that is this. I know by default, when it comes to a SOP, by default, if your opponent turns, that's a break. Now, if you play by email enough, you realize that for those first 16 impulses, you disable that. There's no turn break. You just go. Because of invariably, those first 16 impulses don't mean squat. If the person turns, how much will that actually change what you do? Most probably, it won't change anything whatsoever. Obviously, if the person, you can say, well, okay, if the person turns right, then a break. But if a person turns left, who cares? If it goes straight, fine. Sidestep, who cares? But if they turn right, meaning when it comes to a tournament play, if you turn right, what that means is that you're going for a corner dodge. And if you're doing a corner dodge, then you might adjust what you're doing, because if your opponent does a corner dodge, that means if you had planned on doing a corner dodge, you don't want to do a corner dodge, because it would just basically, you're now both of you are running away from each other. It's kind of pointless. At that point, if your opponent does a corner dodge, you're going to want to come straight in. So that's one of the few times that you might actually have a break for, say, if he turns right, break. Otherwise, don't break. But the reason why I say that is just because the first 16 impulses, you can get through the first turn. In theory, you can get through the first turn within, if everyone's responsive, you can get it done in like 2 or 3 days through turn 1. Just like that. Because of, especially after you've played by email for a while, you realize how much of the minutia, how the little itty bitty tweaks and so forth don't mean squat. Because even though people, they him and haw about those, I got that one extra hex or one less hex, I have to be one hex closer or farther away, it doesn't matter that much. If you realize you can actually let your hands off the reins It actually does not matter. Now, I mentioned that you can do a plot. Yeah, you can do just a straight plot, and then you can actually say, okay, I'm going to move here, here, and here. But assuming that assuming that you have that you're going faster than your opponent, you have the initiative. That's the word I was looking for. If you have the initiative, what you can do is you can put in maintain separation, meaning that if he sidesteps towards you, you sidestep away. If he turns in towards you, then you want to break. If he turns out, you want to break. But if you're going straight in, if you're both going straight, the separations, you want that to remain the same. So, but you can do orders like that where you can, if you want to, you can actually do seeking movement, i.e., okay, move closer to my opponent, and seeking movement, targeting shield number blah. Because you can targeting for shield number 1 or shield number 6 or 2, or the rear shields, 3 or 5. And the reason why you might want to do that is because you're just going to act like a seeking weapon, and actually for your seeking weapons, you would do that. So the whole idea is either you want to follow your target or you want to lead the target. Lead the target, you want to be in front of the target. The idea is to get the seeking weapon in front of the target. But the follow, you're aiming so that if the opponent actually turns away from the seeking weapon, it will be following behind him. Versus, try to stay in front of him. You're going to do your best to stay close to that, in the shield number 1 arc. And the great thing about those kind of things is you don't do squat. You just tell the moderator, this is the way I want you to move it, and you can move it. Now, I've known some people that get really, really antsy about those movements. I still remember one play by email game that I was playing. I was moderating. And this guy just, as a moderator, he just basically ticked me off. And the reason why I say that is because basically he was not playing within the spirit of the play by email. I.e., after he got to a certain range, he wanted every single impulse to move. Now, I understand when you're really close, that makes sense. When you get within like range 5 or even range 8, things can slow down quite a bit. You could actually have it so you only plot one impulse at a time. But the whole idea of play by email is to run through a game as quickly as possible. And how do you do that? You do that by knowing when it's okay to let go of the reins. To have it so that you can just put in your orders that you trust, and on the execution of the order, because you know what you have in mind. And the whole idea is communicating that fact to the moderator when it comes to these simplistic orders. The moderator is not going to play the game for you. The moderator, his job is to follow the orders that you give him and do it to the best ability to follow those orders. Now, if this is always one thing that the moderator has to do, now here's the tough part. The moderator is supposed to be dumb. All he's supposed to do is follow follow your orders. I.e., if you have plotted to do a turn on impulse 8, the moderator can't tell you, oh, you do realize in impulse 8, you will not be able to turn, or you're accidentally trying to do 2 side slips in a row on impulse as of impulse 8. You, as a moderator, you can't do diddly. Not until impulse 8. At impulse 8, what you would do is you do a break because it was illegal order, and then you'd wait for the person's response because of it's not your job to tell them that somewhere along the lines, somewhere in the future, a future action which you've told, that the player has told the moderator that action will be illegal. It's not the moderator's job to tell them ahead of time that action will be illegal. Why? Because actually, if you think about it, in real life, IRL, you don't have some person looking over your shoulder saying, what you're planning on doing is illegal, right? You don't usually find out until you actually attempt to take that action, and then your opponent might say, hey, you can't do that. Or, in some cases, you might not find out until maybe you double check your EA, or double check that, okay, I charged that weapon or something like that, and then you figure out, oh, I can't do that. Or, even worse, which is that you don't see it, your opponent doesn't know about it because it was an illegal move, because basically, let's say your weapon wasn't fully charged, but you didn't realize it, and your opponent doesn't know, and you fire your weapon, and then you don't realize it until after the game that, oh crap, when I blasted down your number 2 shield, oh well, I couldn't do that. So play by email can be quite interesting of an environment. The important thing, here's always the gotcha, and that is you have to have people that you can trust. You have to have a moderator you can trust. You have to have opponents that you can trust will actually respond. That always has been the biggest issue when it comes to play by email, which is trust. You have to have a certain trust of everybody. Now, when it comes to tournaments, when it comes to tournaments, there's an inherent trust in tournaments to begin with, that you want to play and you want to win, so you can win the tournament. That's inherent part of signing up for a tournament, was that you would play the game and get it done as quickly as possible. Because if you didn't, and you kind of flaked out and you disappeared, it's possible that at that point in the game, you'd be considered the loser, and your opponent would then proceed. And that's if you hadn't told anyone that, I'm going on for a vacation for a month, and I won't have access to email. It's like, I'm sorry, you didn't tell anyone of this fact, so you're gone. But so play by email can be a lot of fun. As I said, the great thing about it is the asynchronous nature. And Lord knows, if you've been listening to me long enough, I tout the whole idea of asynchronous play, because I love the idea of asynchronous play. Was it? I'm playing right. It's not quite asynchronous play per se. There's a game I'm playing called Into the Breach, and it's turn based, but it's not really asynchronous play. It's not like is it? I want to say Frozen Synapses. Or what's the other one? Calm? Oh, not Calm. Forget it. It's awful. But where the whole idea is for frozen synapses, you're playing football, but what you do is you plot out each person's route of where they're going to be going, and then at the end of the turn, there's an action. In this case, of frozen synapses, you throw the football. And the idea being is that, okay, and you plot your movement for your guys, you plot the movement for your opponent, then plots the movement for his guys, and then the whole idea is to outguess each other. So that's truly asynchronous play. Into the Breach is not quite as such. It is more of, it's turn-based where, okay, your pieces can move, but when they move, they then do an action and then complete the action, and that's done. So it's not like you would plot the actions for all your units, and including both movement and the actual, like if they want to do an attack, you would do everything. You plan all that out, and then you click the button execute, and then the turn would run both for you and your opponent. Obviously, when it comes Into the Breach, the way they do it, it makes things much easier and much simpler for you versus, let's say, Warlord, Starfleet Warlord. That's completely asynchronous play, where though it's a little different. I would love to have it truly asynchronous play. The current asynchronous play is kind of weird in that you do all your plots for your movement for all of your ships, and then those get executed for you. But what I would when I first took over Starfleet Warlord, what I wanted to do is take it up to the next level. The next level in my mind is having everybody submit their orders and then go pulse by pulse. Like pulse 1, the players would still go in a certain order before it comes to movement, but everyone would do their pulse 1 movements. Then everyone would do their pulse 2 movements. Then everybody would do their pulse 3 movements and keep going until the end of that turn. And that's one thing I thought about for Starfleet Warlord, and actually be doing some kind of asynchronous play like that. Basically, take Starfleet Warlord to the next level. I still would like to do that. I think that'd be kind of cool. But at the moment, I think that would be a huge change to the current set of players that are used to the way Starfleet Warlord works, which is, okay, you submit your orders, you do all your movement. Yes, you don't know what your opponent has done or opponents have done since you last moved. Because you don't get a report on what they've done, except for with your own reports. There's no... See, that's the one thing with Starfleet Warlord, which is really interesting, in that you submit your orders, you get the response back from your orders. Now, your next player, I take the next player's set of orders and I run those. It's a different way of asynchronous play. Still actually play by email, believe it or not, because I accept the orders via email. I execute the orders and then I send them out via email. Starfleet Warlord, I still allow them to scan in, print out copies of their order sheets and then email them to me, or they can fax it to me because I still have a fax machine. Actually, it's not really a fax machine. What it is a fax service. And actually, that's been very useful, not just in Starfleet Warlord, but also for personal needs every once in a while, because Lord knows, every once in a while there are some things that you have to fax. As goofy that is these days in the electronic age, but it is what it is. But anyway, so so the thing is with Starfleet Warlord, you don't know where your, if you know your opponent is in hexes like 13, 15, 12, 11, and 11, 11. By the time, if you went directly to 12, 11, or 11, 11, you might when you get there, your opponent might not be there. Of course, the opponent might see where you're located and go right towards you. So there's a possibility that guys might meet in the middle. It's really interesting to see how to actually attack a person's fleet other than sites. If you are actually at a person's site, if a person owns a site, they can have a fleet at the site. Defense forces. So that's one of the few times that you know where the battle is, so you go right to that hex. Versus an open fleet, open space battle, as they would call it. You run into a person's fleet out in space. Now, usually it's basically guessing where your opponent's going to be. In that case, and you're assuming, because you don't know, is he coming towards you? Is he going away from you? Where is he going? It's possible because there's only a maximum of 6 movements per turn. It depends upon the ship, how fast they go. But a maximum, that go 6 hexes, which means that you can see them, depending upon where they're on the board. In theory, you might be able to see them for 2 turns, possibly 3 turns as they move across the board. Move across your sector. Because each sector is 16 by 16 hex map, is what it is. But so actually meeting them up in the middle of space it's relatively low percentage. But the thing is, even if you meet them up, there's what's called an attack percentage. That means depending upon how much, when it comes to the fleets, if they're even, or if you're like 90% of their fleet or 50%, you can set it to be as low or as high as you want. When it comes to, you have to have like 120% of your opponent's fleet, and otherwise you'll bounce. And what a bounce is basically is that you would go to, when you go to a hex where there's a fleet, combat takes place unless you decide to bounce. Bounce, you hit that fleet and then you go, oh, no, I don't think I'm going to fight them, and then you move back 1 hex. Here is always the issue on bounces in Starfleet Warlord. If there is a bounce in Starfleet Warlord, you, for the most part, stop. Because of most of the time, your movement is based off of the previous hex that you were located in. Now, depending upon what your movement plot for those ships is, you can actually keep moving. Because of, if you have it so that you go like here, like go from, I'm going to say like 10-10 to 10-9 to 10-8. Obviously, if you meet a fleet at 10-9 and you bounce back to 10-10, you're not going to be able to go to 10-8. But if your plot is from 10-8 to 10-9 to, let's say, 11-10. I'm assuming at the moment 11-10 is next to 10-11 and right next to 10-9. I don't know this off the top of my head, so please don't shoot me for getting it wrong. But let's say that 11-10 is right next to 10-10 and also next to 10-9. So that if you bounced it if you went from 10-10 to 10-9 where you met the fleet and you bounced off, so you're back to 10-10, at that point, then you could actually move to 11-10. Now, most of the time, you're not going to plot like that, but that is a possibility. Now, there's some goofiness I have seen where I've actually seen people purpose. I'm not sure if it's purposeful or not. Some cases, I know some cases it is purposeful, where they'll actually plot an illegal plot because they want it to bounce. Why? I don't know. Other cases, it's considered a quote unquote illegal plot by the engine, but that's only because the engine that where I'm entering into orders is dumb. It doesn't know if the next hex that you're going into has like a Stargate between, which because when you enter a hex where there's a Stargate, you get transported to the location where the Stargate comes out to. But the engine doesn't know that where I'm entering the orders, doesn't know about it. Now when I run the orders, it knows about it. And actually, that's part of it. It'll say, okay, there's a Stargate in this hex. Where's the hex location that it will send you to? Okay, it sends you to this. Then it moves that ship from the Stargate location to the new location. Now, obviously, one of the things there is the possibility to do, which is there's a special event. There's a special event where you can basically disable a single Stargate. So it has to be, I think it has to be like your first order or something like that for Starfleet Warlord, and it will basically disable a Stargate that you know of. And if you disable a Stargate, all of a sudden your opponent can be into a very rude surprise, especially if two things. One, the Stargate takes you to a hex close to you, so basically it would be a big surprise for you. If you didn't disable it. So your opponent might be expecting that the Stargate was going to take him to right next to one of your major sites. So he can attack you. But you disable it, and all of a sudden he doesn't do that. He's going to be the shock of his life. Or if he's trying to get away from you. And the Stargate doesn't work. Again, shock. Because invariably, his movement plot for that ship is going to include the new hex position. What that means is it's going to bounce. And it's going to move to the Stargate location and stay there. And then next movement, it's going to bounce. Because of the Stargate's disabled. So, that's Starfleet Warlord, which is, again, it's an interesting game, and especially with the play via email angle, it actually is quite cool. Now, obviously, you have to pay for it. So, it's compared to play by email when it comes to Starfleet battles is free. Now, there's one thing I have not done. And that is, I have not actually played by email when it comes to Federation Commander. Now, the one thing I've always thought Federation Commander play by email could be so much speeded up. In my mind, anyway. Because of one thing you could do with play by email with Federation Commander is that you could actually have it so that you wouldn't allow breaks between the impulses. So if a guy turns, you can't turn. You can't react to his turning. Now, what that means actually is the adjustment to tactics is what it is. Because let's say you get close and you're within, let's say, 2 hexes, and you're afraid, then you're going to fly right past him. You want to get a little closer, but you're afraid you're going to fly right past him. He's not moving very fast, so you're going to try to outguess him. And what you do is you cancel, like you'll say, okay, well, I'm supposed to move 3 turns. So you cancel 3 movements. So you only move 1 movement, in theory. It's kind of goofy when it comes to Federation Commander and movements, because cancel movements considered movement even if you don't move. It's weird, I know. But, so, so you might be using cancel movement a whole heck of a lot more. Or, or plotted changes. Not plotted changes. Because there's no plotted changes in Federation Commander. But, pay for the accelerated movement, I think that's what it's called, at the beginning of the impulse. So, the whole idea is you two are when you get close, is trying to outget your opponent. Now, getting to range 1, I think, would be very difficult to do. And there you can do it, but it's a little more difficult when it comes to if you're not allowed to break in the middle of those. Basically, when you're moving in the sub pulses, I think, and I honestly feel like that would speed things up. Now, when I see a Federation Commander played by email working in my mind, where you don't break for subpulse movements, is that you would not break for subpulse. You basically run for each impulse. Now, obviously, this would be a little slower than SFB in certain respects. Depends. Because I was thinking about it, in an automated fashion, you could have it so that, that could be completely automated. Now, obviously, there still have to be some breaks for, let's say, that your opponent decides to launch a drone. You still have to have the opportunity to fire at that drone. You have to have the ability to do defensive fire. So in which case, then you'd have a break for something along those lines. Now, the good thing about having it so you had no breaks, in theory, you could actually automate the whole process. Now, in theory, that could slow it down. I'm not, because now you're having an auto break for each impulse. Even though there's only 8 impulses, you still have to do an auto break for each impulse, and which means that it could take, what normally for SFB might take 3 days, might take 8 days for Federation Commander, i.e. it would take a lot slower. Versus having a moderator where you can say, okay, here's my plot, boom, 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 and allow breaks for turns and things like that and subpulses. Now, obviously, you can mix the two and have it so that, say, you still can't do breaks in subpulses when it comes to movement. But if during the movement portion of the impulse, if they turned, you can have a break at that point. So it's still not perfect, but I like the idea just because I think it's automatable. It's a heck of a lot more automatable than SFB. And, the idea of basically being moderatorless would be cool. It would allow people to play against each other a heck of a lot more. And it wouldn't require them to be either IRL, in real life, or, face to face, or actually online with each other. You can still have the interaction. You still have to communicate via email and so forth. Or even if you have it as an automated client, you can still send messages back and forth between the opponents, and that's fine. Obviously, they would be more of automated messages along the lines of like Twitter, or what's another good one? Well, email. where it's delayed. You pick up the message whenever you pick up the message, or it can be immediate or whatever. I still like I still have the SFU ships concept, which I still have laying around somewhere. My guess I might never implement that. I would like to, but there's some details I still have to work out when it comes to that. Now, Federation Empire play by email. That's one of those ones that currently people do it. They usually play using either Cyberboard or Vassal is what they use. Now, there are certain things that obviously I have not actually looked into how they play it, but there are certain situations that it's not easy to do when it comes to certain things of Federation Empire when you're trying to play moderator without a moderator. Because there are certain secret actions that can take place. It's not as much as an issue with FNE than SFB, where in SFB everything's secret. Federation Empire, most of it is in public. When it comes to your economic forms, that's shown. Obviously, you're planning for economic forms. That's private, but again, that can be handled on Cyberboard and Vassal. And since it's each person's turn, the only difficulty comes to being is for reactive movement. That's when it becomes difficult, i.e., you move your ships close to one of your opponent's ships, they can actually react immediately and attack you because you enter their zone. So, see, that's the tough one when it comes to play by email for FNE. Other than that, I don't know of any other issues. Now, as I said, I'm not as familiar with FNE when it comes to play by email, but I think that it can be done, and I know some people who actually do it. If you go to the discussion board, at starfleetgames.com/discuss, you will find some play by emails when it comes to FNE there. At the moment, I don't think either the starfleetgames.com or their Federation Commander, I think it's PHP BBS. I forget what the software is, but either one of those has a really active play by email community. It's sad that that's the case, but the biggest issue there, as I said, is that we have so many other ways of playing online. That's whether it is using like the online client or whether it is someone just doing something goofy, which you can do, which is setting up two webcams. Both of you have a board where you have the webcam is facing the board, and then you can watch while he moves his ship, you move his ship on your board, and then you move your ship, and he watches you move your ship on your board, and he duplicates it on his board. And then, of course, when you roll die, you roll it on the board so that you can see via the camera. You can see what the die rolls were. Obviously, if you want to, you can use something a little more better when it comes to like having a die roll that can be on the screen that can show you a list of die rolls, which makes things a lot bit easier to see what the actual values were. Obviously, if you can trust the person you're playing against, you can have them roll on the camera. But you'll trust that even if you can't quite read the die rolls, you could still trust him that he wouldn't call like a 12 and 11. Something along those lines. But so and there's two different ways of playing online right there. Obviously, playing in real life, but again, all of those are immediate, and it's sad to see that people don't think about playing by email anymore. Because that's still a very rich way of playing. You can still play SFU. You can still play Federation Commander. Actually, that's one thing I probably will do after I get offline here. Is actually I'll check the Federation Commander BBS and see what they say. If there's anyone playing Federation Commander, and looking for opponents, looking for moderators there, which would be interesting. And I think there might be a set of play by email rules for Federation Commander. I have to double check on that because I know what happened was that back in the day, and I do mean back in the day, ADB actually created a nice web page of how to play using play by email. There are actually play by email rules. It's not really rules, but these are the procedures of how you play by email. That's basically what it is. And so it allows anyone who actually has never played by email before can play by email. Here are what you have to do. Now, there's quite a few pages of documentation on that. And that's just so it captures everything. It's just like SFB. SFB, after you know the rules of SFB, unless there's actually a specific situation where you want to know the interaction between two things, you don't look up the rules. In the case of the play by email rules, procedures, the same thing applies. That after you know how to play it, you might just use it as a reference, but you rarely ever need to look at the rules because you know how the interactions are supposed to take place, and you can take liberties, because it's not a strict set of rules. You can take liberties how you describe your orders. It doesn't have to be a certain format, but it has to be understandable. And now that's one of the things that, again, might come up late. If you know that this one order that this is for a moderator, but moderator has an order from a player, and that situation, when it gets that situation where he doesn't know what to do, there'll be a break. In which case, then you have to clarify what that order actually means. Assuming that it doesn't have the possibility of applying earlier on, obviously, if it can be applied the first impulse, then a moderator will send back the SOP and go, clarify this. So that it is known what the actual intention is. You have to be really clear about how you write your orders. Really clear when it comes. Most of those orders, it's the conditionals that the whole idea of conditionals and play by email. The whole idea of conditionals is so that you can keep gameplay moving as fast as possible. Obviously, duels, this is not a big issue, though. A big issue is if you play by email fleets. I haven't seen one of those I got involved in one which was it was the almost awesomest play by email game I've ever been involved in. And what the great thing about it was run by Jim Hart. Great guy. But Jim Hart, what he did is he had these two battle stations across this line, and there's just basically you can see on your side of it, you can't see what's happening on your opponent's side of the board across that line, and that zone, the line, it's a kind of a zone that you can't see anything across. But if you have someone on the other side, they can tell you what they see. Now, at the same time, the point of that game was that you have to be honest about how you are communicating. In theory, you can bypass the actual game itself, the moderator itself, and go directly to the player. So you can know what's going on the other side of the board, because he gets communicated about what's going on that side of the board. And so, but if everyone follows the rules when it comes to communication, you're good. But anyway, it's a really awesome. It was a really awesome game, but it takes a lot of work. The fleet games take a lot of work from a moderator, and that's why a moderator might take 4 hours to run the orders for a fleet game, to get through a few impulses because of all the conditionals. Actually, I think he didn't. I'm not sure if he allowed. I think he allowed a limited set of conditionals. Because that's one thing, obviously, if you do fleet battles, there are some things you got to say, okay, we're not having conditionals. Because you have conditionals, then you have to figure out, okay, what is the conditional? When they're actually met? Versus, okay, just do this, and have them run the actual fleet. So, and just have it so that, it's like you do orders for like 4 impulses, but there's no breaks. There's no breaks and there's no conditionals. So it was an interesting game, and if somebody would run one again, I'd be involved again. Now, would I moderate it? No, because Lord knows it is not an easy thing to do. Okay, well, I think with that we'll wrap it up for this evening. I enjoyed talking to you about play by email, both SFB, some Federation Commander, and obviously some other ways, including Starfleet Warlords, of how play by email can actually work. The whole idea of asynchronous play. So with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.